All right, time for your California weather forecast for January 12th. Main thing we're going to be talking about today is that big storm, potentially big storm, that this entire week we've been following the models. It said it was going to come in around Saturday, Sunday, and early models were saying it would bring 7 to 8 feet of snow, and then the models went down to about 4 to 5 feet of snow, then they went down to about 2 to 3 feet of snow. So overall, it seems like that storm has somewhat fallen apart from where we were at the beginning of the week. But the main lesson there is that the models have been changing a ton. So I'm interested to see how much they've changed in the last 2 days because I didn't do a forecast yesterday. So just looking at California right now, it does look like there's some moisture moving in mostly to Northern California. Although you notice, it's interesting, it almost looks like it's a clockwise rotation of these clouds. Oh, and that actually makes a lot of sense because I remember we have a high pressure system right here. So that is creating this clockwise rotation. And then the low was going to be moving down right here, and it was going to be funneling in moisture into Northern California. But the last time I checked, so on Wednesday, the reason that this storm changed so much is because of this high right here, where the high was actually kind of bumping out the low and keeping the low more to the north than the original models were showing. Original models were showing low goes right off the California coast, just funnels in moisture repeatedly, leads to 5 to 7 feet of snow. But it's kind of this high that you could say ruined the storm for California, but I guess it depends on your perspective. Because anytime there's a big storm, you have some hazards that pop up. But right now we are a little below average in terms of our rain and snow. So I was kind of thinking that we do need a good storm at this point. So that is interesting that at first I was like, why are this clouds spinning clockwise if there's a storm coming in? But that actually makes sense. It's because of the high. So I did mention hazards. That's usually the first thing that we check. Yeah, let's check the radar. I don't think rain started this early. Yeah, it looks like the rain is still to the north of us, but it looks like it's maybe getting close to Northern California. It's very light though. Can't even really tell if that is rain. Now let's go check out if there's some hazards. And definitely looks like there are, mostly in Northern California. So we do still have the coastal flood advisory around the Bay Area. Combination of the high tides, and I think there's still some big surf in the water. That's in effect from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Friday. So yeah, that'd be right around the high tide. Details, tidal levels are running 0.2 foot higher than tidal predictions. Peaks at 11:20 Friday. So that could lead to some coastal flooding there. But I think, again, the main story is what's going on with the storm that's coming in. So up to the northwest coast of California, we actually do have a flood watch. I don't think I saw any flood watches come up with the storms that we had on Tuesday and Wednesday. So right there, that tells you we're expecting to see a bit more rainfall, at least in the northwestern portions of California. So flood watch remains in effect from 10 p.m. this evening through late Saturday night. And that's up in NorCal. So maybe the storm moves to the south after that. When impacts, creeks and streams may rise out of their banks, flooding may occur. And yeah, that'll be something to watch there. And then what's that purple? We have the winter weather advisory. That's going to be in effect from 10 p.m. this evening to 10 a.m. on Sunday. So that goes through Saturday night into Sunday morning. Snow expected, total snow accumulations of 10 inches, winds gusting as high as 45 miles per hour. And that's where you see that purple right there. But where we have some real weather, I think, going on, I think this will be probably the top story of the day is up in the Sierra. Because I don't think coastal flood advisory is going to, even the flood watch is going to outweigh some of the travel and just impacts we'll have up in the mountains. So we will definitely focus on the mountains. But first I want to check out some of the graphics they produce. They're always good. Rainfall forecast late this week through this weekend. Oh, interesting. It actually looks like the rainfall is maybe I can't remember exactly what it was showing on Wednesday, but 0.5 to 1 inch for San Francisco, up to 1.5 inches for Santa Rosa. Obviously, where we have that flood watch in place, that's where it could be, 2 to 3 inches around there. Santa Cruz, 0.5 to 1 inch. So you notice it's mostly up in Northern California, and that actually ties back to this high that's blocking the low from moving to the south. You can actually see how that impacts your rainfall totals right there. Big Sur, which usually gets a lot of rainfall, is just 0.2 to 0.5. And it's because that high is blocking the storm from moving down and bringing more moisture into the central coast. And then king tides return January 12th. Seems like we've had a lot of king tides recently. I should maybe do a story on that soon about what are king tides? When do they happen? We know it's because you have the moon and the sun kind of having double gravity pulling the water from the earth that leads to the extra high tides. But I'd love to know, like, in that astronomical pattern, why it seems like they're occurring so much right now. Yeah, I think that's interesting. Okay, let's read the forecast. Let's check it out. And it says rain and wind. And this is for mostly the Bay Area down to Santa Cruz Mountains. Rain and wind return late Friday through Saturday as a cold front moves over the region. More cold air. I'm sick of it. Fair weather will return early next week. That's what I like to hear, with warming temperatures by midweek. Okay, so that's a pretty good forecast for the Bay Area. It's not enough rainfall where you see flood watches for the Bay Area. It's just enough rain to, bring in some good moisture into our fuels, bring some water into our reservoirs. And then right when we pick up some rain, you might be getting a little tired of it. We're going to be warming up next week. So I'd love to see that in the forecast. Now, I want to check out what the Sacramento office has to say, because they always have some good stuff on the snow. Timing Friday evening through Saturday. Interesting. So it seems like the storm's a little... One of the reasons that our totals have come down with this storm throughout the week is originally it was showing that it was just going to be nonstop heavy rain, heavy snow for days and days at a time. And now it seems like the storm's a bit... It doesn't last as long, I'll put it that way. So forecast 1 to 2 feet of snow above 6,000 feet in the warning area. 4 to 8 inches above 3,000 feet in the advisory area. Wind gusts as high as 50 miles per hour. Snow levels 25 to 3,500 Friday, rising to 4,500, 6,000 by Saturday. So that's the opposite of the storms we had on, I don't know if you'd call Tuesday's a storm, but Wednesday was a storm. Where with those systems, the cold front came through and then it brought in some colder air behind it. So the snow levels actually dropped down the second day of the storm. Whereas this is saying the snow levels are actually going to go up the second day, which makes me think the system is going to be pulling in some air from the south and actually be warming things up. And overall, it looks like obviously much, much less snow than the original models were showing. That's at 5 to 7 feet by the end of this week. And that's why I almost purposely in my thumbnail chose the one that showed that it's not as much snow as we were thinking. With that being said, though, 1 to 2 feet of snow with wind gusts as high as 50 miles per hour. That's I think you'd put that in the category of major snowstorm. And that'll definitely have some big impacts, chain controls, maybe some road closures. You have the impacts there. Difficult driving conditions, major travel delays, road closures possible. Travel is highly discouraged. Yeah, so just because comparatively to what the models were showing at the beginning of the week, this doesn't look as bad, it's still not exactly something to mess around with. Looking at it, yeah, they're putting it as major impacts with this system. I still just think it's interesting that the snow levels are going up after a cold front would come through. It must mean we're bringing in air from the south. And then, so that was our snow forecast. You can see 6 to 8 inches, maybe 1 to 2 feet up around Quincy, South Lake Tahoe. You start to see some of that red. That could be over a foot. Rain forecast. Yeah, this is similar to what we were looking at earlier. This actually shows the northwest coast, though, 2 to 3 inches. Yeah, for Eureka, 3 inches for Fort Bragg, and this is rain. 1.5 for parts of the Sacramento Valley. You can just see how quickly it tapers off as you go south because of that high that's keeping it to the north. And then wind forecast. It's going to be windy. It doesn't look like the worst system around the Bay Area. 20 to 30 miles per hour. A little windier around Fort Bragg, 30 to 35. And then we usually do see the windiest conditions up in the Sierra, 35 to 40 miles per hour. And obviously that can lead to some downed trees, some power outages. Don't think anything too new there. Let's check out the forecast discussion. A storm system spreads in later today and tonight and continues through Saturday night. Mountain travel impacts expected with periods of heavy snow and gusty winds. The valley will also have gusty winds with periods of moderate rain. So, yeah, that makes sense. It seems like it is more of a snow. And this has been the theme over the last 3 or 4 systems where it's actually not that much rain, but then it's been a decent amount of snow. And to be honest, that might be the exact way we'd want it because our reservoirs aren't in that bad of shape after all the rain that we picked up last year. But the best reservoir that we have is the snowpack. So if you had to pick one, you probably would want as much snow as possible. That's also where we have a lot of forests, a lot of dead trees. So it's good to be able to slowly melt that snow as you get into wildfire season. Just continues to bring moisture into your fuels. So that's decent news there. But this could definitely have some major impacts in terms of travel. So I'll take one quick look at the chat. Looks like there's a few people on here. You like the no nonsense, non-clickbait thumbnails. Yeah, that's kind of the main thing that I go for is, and to me it's just the classic story of the boy who cried wolf. If every single day you're saying there's going to be some major snowstorm with huge impacts and 3 to 4 feet, or you're just kind of overhyping things and sensationalizing things, then when there actually is a big storm coming in, then nobody's going to believe you because you always just say there's a big storm. And then that can actually be potentially dangerous because as a broadcast meteorologist, your credibility depends on how much your viewers trust you. So if every day you're just trying to milk your viewers for their attention by basically lying to them, then you're going to end up doing nothing but destroy your own credibility. And then people won't trust you. And then ironically, in the long run, then people also don't listen to you, which was kind of what you were trying to get out of them in the first part. So I just try to interpret the maps as well as I can, and just try to communicate what's going on. So I clicked on the winter storm warning for the Sierra, and it says remains in effect from 7 p.m. this evening to 4 a.m. Sunday above 4,500 feet. And then heavy snow expected, total snow accumulations of 1 to 2 feet. Winds could gust as high as 50 miles per hour. And then snow levels, that's the next thing. That's what I wanted to see. Snow levels will be at 3,500 feet Friday night, rising to 4,500 to 6,000 feet Saturday morning. Heaviest amounts above 5,000 feet. Okay, so doesn't look like it's, I was complaining about the cold air earlier. It doesn't look like this is as cold of a system. So I personally like to see that. And then we already clicked through all of those. So now I think we're in a good position to go check out some of the maps. We'll just go quick view through the rainfall. It always does that. There we go. Quick view through the rainfall. That's that storm. Most of it up in the northwestern portions of California. To be honest, I'm not going to cover Southern California in this forecast today, and that's the reason why. It looks like that high is blocking enough of this storm up to towards the north that really is just a NorCal storm at this point. And then let's check it out as well for total snowfall. One important thing I will say, we look at the 10 to 1 inches. So that would be like if you have an inch of precipitable water, like rain, then it'll turn into 10 inches of snow. But a lot of our systems earlier this week, it was so cold that makes your snow fluffier. So it was more like a 15 to 1 or even a 20 to 1 ratio. So that's why when we were looking at this map originally this week, it kept saying smaller totals than what the National Weather Service was talking about. And part of me was like, is the National Weather Service just overhyping these systems to try to, I don't know, keep people safer so people take it more seriously? That's kind of the other argument around the Boy Who Cried Wolf statement that I was talking about earlier. But in reality, their forecasts, I think, were more accurate than mine because they were probably going off of 15 to 1 or 20 to 1 ratios, which doesn't happen often. Most of the time, this map is going to be perfect, but those systems were exceptionally cold. They're 20 to 30 degrees below average. So this map would have been undercalling how much snow was coming in. Whereas with this storm, it doesn't look like it's exceptionally cold. So I think the snow totals here should be fairly accurate. So once again, looks like the system compared to the other days we've been following it has decreased in the amount of snow that we're going to see. Although it'll still have some major impacts because 1 to 2 feet are possible. And it's also shifted a little bit more to the north. Whereas originally we're seeing orange all the way down into the southern Sierra. Now they're just in the blue, which would be less than a foot. So let's click through. I want to check out the exact timing on this, which would be in NorCal. Now let's go NorCal rain rates. And it's asking me to log in again. It'll do that quickly. I think it sometimes does that just so it logs me out on purpose so I have to look at their ads again. And then I have to go through the process of clicking through all of this stuff. All right, so let's check out the timing on this system. That's 10 a.m. Friday. Yeah, it looked like when we checked out the radar, there was maybe a little bit coming into the very northwestern portions of the state. So models, as I mentioned, the closer you get to the actual date, the more accurate they become. And looks like they're getting better now. 1 p.m. Friday, 4 p.m. Friday, 7 p.m. Friday, 10 p.m. Friday. So that right there goes along. I've purposely kept this map up. It goes along with what we were talking about. Where the highs right here, that is rotating like this. That's why you see the clouds moving like that. And the low that's trying to move down is just getting bumped around that high. So it's keeping some of the rain and snow up here, but it's keeping that low from traveling down here. So that's why a lot of the rain and snow early on just up to the north. And it looks like pretty light rain, light snow, and then the heavy stuff starts to come in Saturday morning. So what a change right there. It's kind of like the lows just hovering, and then it comes in early Saturday morning. That's 7 a.m. You start to see the heavy rainfall along the California coast, northern California coast. Heavy snowfall starting to build in. And then 10 a.m. on Saturday, that's when it looks like the storm has arrived. Still, though, doesn't look like it's going to be huge rainfall rates for the Bay Area just yet. A lot of heavy rain up in... Yeah, it makes sense that they have a flood watch up there. That's a long period of time to have that heavy rain directly over them. And then eventually it looks like perhaps what you'd call the front moves down to the Bay Area to the central Sierra. That's 10 p.m. on Saturday. But at that point, it seems like a lot of the moisture has already been squeezed out, although it's still some decent snowfall rates up in the mountains, and maybe a few periods of heavy rain. That was what I noticed, even on Wednesday's system, where it looked like, oh, it's just going to be some light to moderate rain out there. I had one part of my drive for about 3 minutes where it was absolutely pouring. So across the board, it looks like it's very heavy rain for the northwestern parts of the state. Heavy snow, but where most, for our more highly populated areas, it doesn't look like it's going to be one of those storms that has major impacts for the Bay Area, Central Coast, or the Sacramento Valley. I'd say the major impacts will be northern parts of the state and then up in the Sierra. So part of the reason for that is going to be with, well, let's see how much rain we're going to get zooming in. So again, it looks like it's just kind of hovering Friday night, and then the real storm hits early Saturday morning. And then I guess I didn't really look at when it's done. So let's check that out one more time. Hovering, early Saturday morning, the real storm arrives, and then it's done early Sunday morning. So it's a pretty quick system. That's maybe why some of our totals aren't as big as they were originally showing. Because, yeah, I think that's pretty intuitive there. I probably don't need to dive into that. So through the weekend, San Francisco, half an inch. San Jose, 0.2. Chico, half an inch. So Sacramento, half an inch. So not a big storm in terms of rainfall for a lot of our highly populated areas. But then northwest coast, that's where we could see 2 to 3 inches of rain. That's why we have the flood watch up there. And then winter weather. Let's check out our total snowfall. And clicking through. Yeah, it's a pretty decent system. You get into the dark red, both up here and right there. That's about 1 to 2 feet of snow. And it said snow levels around 3,500 feet tonight, but there's not that much snow tonight. And then tomorrow, when the real storm arrives, the snow levels jump up to 4,500 feet. So it's not going to be as widespread as some of those really cold systems that we had earlier. So I think that sums that up. Now let's check out, I always like looking at the temperature anomalies because, yeah, it's not as cold of a storm. In the past, when we were looking at this, it's still 5 to 10 degrees below average, but I think it was a storm on Wednesday that was 20 to 30 degrees below average. So that's why the snow is so widespread. That's why our snow levels got so low, and that's why it's been freezing on the Central Coast. I shouldn't say freezing on the Central Coast. I'm kind of a baby when it comes to cold weather. I've lived in California my whole life, so 35 to me is too cold. I'm sure my cousins who live up in Montana where it's negative 30, or if they're watching this, they're just shaking their heads at me. So it's going to be cold, but not as cold as the Tuesday and Wednesday systems. I think it was Monday morning that was actually the coldest day of the year, perhaps. At least for the Central Coast, up in the Sierra, I think it was Thursday morning. Now, it did mention winds, so we should look at the winds. And, this is actually a better visual, so you can see what's going on. See the high right there? That's what's keeping the low from dropping down into California earlier. You do still have the low up here, and that's what's pushing in the moisture, especially into the northwestern parts of the state. But you see how the high is just blocking it from coming down. And then eventually, as we get into Saturday, the high is still kind of blocking it. That's why we're not talking about Southern California today. Is because the high is kind of keeping the system to the north. You can actually see where the two winds from the high that's moving clockwise and the low that's moving counterclockwise come together. And at that point, we do have some very gusty winds up in the Sierra. That's showing 50 mile per hour gusts, which means you can have some isolated pockets that are maybe 60 to 70 miles per hour. And then let's go back to tonight. System starts to move in. It gets windy up in Northern California. This is now into tomorrow evening. So it looks like tomorrow evening is when the really windy conditions are showing up in the Sierra and even in the Bay Area and Central Coast. We'll see some 20 to 30 mile per hour gusts there. So overall, I would say that the main story is the heavy snow that's going up into the Sierra and even perhaps the rain forecast with some of the heavy rain moving into the northwestern portions of the state. But I'd say the main impacts are going to be due to the heavy snow and gusty winds that reduces your visibility. 1 to 2 feet of snow above 6,000 feet, 4 to 8 inches above 3,000 feet. So when you combine that with wind gusts at 50 miles per hour, we do have the potential for some major impacts. Some road closures, definitely some chain controls. So yeah, I'll probably do another forecast on this tomorrow. Maybe I'll do a live one as the storm is at its peak and we can really follow what's going on as it's unfolding. But I'd say overall it's a good thing that this system trended down from where the models were originally this week. That would have been ridiculous if we got 7 feet of snow by the end of the weekend. But yeah, I think that pretty much sums up the forecast. I am going to do a short form video. It'll be a little delayed. I think I'm going to go try to play some pickleball real quick. But then I'll do the short form video. Probably get that out by 2 or 3 this afternoon, hopefully. And that'll just be the more concise forecast for what the top California weather story is of the day. So hopefully this video was helpful, and thanks for watching.